Everyone, thanks for joining. Today I'm speaking with Wilfred Reilly. Will is an associate professor of political science at Kentucky State University. He's also an author. His books include Hate Crime Hoax, $50 Million Question, Taboo, and his most recent one is Lies My Liberal Teacher Told Me. And also, he is now the co-founder of Unified Solutions America, which, from my understanding, they're going to try to de-Wokify corporate America. Hey, Will, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, great to be on, man.
So your new venture here. Um, It seems like quite is it going to be like a Sisyphean task or like it's not exactly a small job you've taken on there.
Yeah, well, the new company is Unified Solutions America. That's capital USA. You can check us out on the web at unifiedsolutionsamerica.com. But yeah, the idea is that we're an anti-DEI consultancy to some extent. I mean, you could say a pro-merit hiring consultancy if you prefer. But what we're going to do is come into companies, and there are really three services. We can use people like Michael Young, Local Distance, who are almost philosophers, to go through your corporate materials and remove the language and the content that came in during the DEI era. It turns out they're very recognizable terms that you can signal with an AI. Two, we have people available to do day-long seminars and trainings on what it is that you've been exposed to, what CRT is, what gender ideology is, where modern anti-dating and sexual harassment policies come from in feminism. We can talk about all that. We have a great staff of people that are coming on to consult. Like you've met a lot of them, but I mean, like Charles Love from Cut the Bull, Shamika Michelle from Fearless. Logan Lansing, who wrote The Queering of the American Child. James Lindsay, maybe on occasion, like he's obviously pretty busy, but Mike Young, Wokel, who does a lot of the same stuff.
Yep.
I mean, myself, the other founder of the company, Brooks Crenshaw, who's an intel guy with the Navy SEALs, Kevin Jackson, who's a media executive, he owns the Kevin Jackson Project. So we've got these people that can come in and do this. And third, we have an alternative hiring methodology, which is based around merit. So we find that outside the Fortune 100, people don't really often quantify what it is to be good, like who's the best sales guy, the best IT guy, so on. And we think there are obvious things you can look at. I mean, from the clear stuff like past productivity to more trademark ideas in order to pick people, hire people, train people. So we want to basically get DEI out of companies. When you say is that Sisyphean, like yeah, I mean you definitely think of some of the Greek myths, like people pushing rocks up hills forever and so on. I mean, I think less so though. Like companies adopted this not because they were really big fans of bell hooks, but because they didn't want to get sued, basically. And I mean, under the Obama or the Biden Department of Justice, it was actually pretty likely that you would if you didn't meet certain proportional representation and hiring requirements, for example. Now the picture is almost the opposite. I mean, you and I both followed fair admissions where the Asian and South Asian kids, and they picked Asian plaintiffs for a reason, went in and sued Harvard and UNC, possibly the best known private and public in the country, and said, like, look, there's a 300-point affirmative action advantage if you're Hispanic or black. Asians are disadvantaged by 140 or whatever it was points relative to whites. That should be illegal. And the court actually said that should be illegal. Yeah. So affirmative action in higher ed and in many cases in the workplace is now gone. So the shoes on the other foot. Like if someone comes in and says, "Hey, you guys are really at risk for customer disengagement and for some lawsuits for what you're doing," I mean, I think people are gonna listen to us. So this is a good time to be doing it.
Yeah, but okay. Look, I when I said Sisyphean, I was thinking more along the lines of I. Well, first of all, when people say we've reached peak woke, I don't think we have. There's still a lot of stuff going on, but it's more okay. There's pushback in higher ed and whatever Trump's putting in legislation, which I've always argued that legislation was going to be needed. It's too far gone. Um, but K through 12 is still going full steam ahead with this stuff. And if you have a generation that grows up, and you've already had, I mean, it's been 8, 9 years that it's been in K through 12 in some parts of the country. If you have a generation that's grown up on this, even if it's pared back in college, they still have that mindset. And I'm just like, it's my thing is you can get it out of corporations now, you can get it out of corporate America now. you won't have, you'll have merit-based hiring. You won't have the Kendi version of DEI, or whatever the CRT version of DEI. You might have, like, what was her name? Chloe Valdary did
Right.
diversity training, but it wasn't woke. There was also I think Irshad Manji was doing some as well. I'm not sure if she still is. So you had some of this stuff that was filled the requirements for diversity trainings, but you didn't have the woke stuff. But I'm just saying, you've got a population that's going to grow up using that lens. Whether they use that lens to push, what you would typically think, like your typical woke stuff, like the BLM type of stuff, or if you go the other direction and you go ultra like white nationalist, you're still going to use the grievance tools. So that's where my concern is. It's, yeah, you can get it out for a while, but unless that background is fixed, like if you don't fix K through 12 and you don't fix higher education, it's a war of attrition that you're gonna lose. I mean, at one point or other.
Yeah, I mean, so it's a multi-stage fight. Like, I think that what we're humans don't do a lot of new things. Modern wars are still motivated by wrath of the very, Byzantine variety. If you look at Russia and Ukraine, and I mean, this is just the sin of envy, sort of. Like the idea that if you have problems in your life, and I actually think that's fairly deep. Like the idea that if you have problems in your life, the reason isn't that you suck or even that the market sucks right now, but that there's this external cabal of people that have created this facially neutral looking society that in fact is like a horrible Gnostic trap for you. I mean, that used to be a Christian and Islamic heresy. Like this idea goes back a really, really long time. So yeah, I mean, we're gonna have to fight it on different levels. I mean, right now the field is pretty ripe in corporate America. But yeah, in higher ed, I mean, the numbers like sociology, which is one of the most popular majors, there are 48 liberals and Democrats to every one conservative or Republican. And in political science, I think it's 17 to 1. And the thing with this is that secondary education is almost as bad. I mean, the percentage of teachers that are both female and liberal, which are kind of female and Democrat, which are two proxies for, pretty close to the left, is 78%, something like that. It's over 70%. So I don't want to make up an exact number there. I mean, I think
Yeah.
78 is the last one I heard, but like this is an issue. And yeah, we're going to have to fight it as a society. It's actually really problematic because this is something I talked about with my fiance the other day, that a lot of the policy norms in our society right now are being written by a really weird fringe of people. Like the most fanatically studies majoring folks that we knew in college that would like stand outside the women's house smoking clove cigarettes are now in design roles in America. And that's uniquely weird when you think about it. Like on most college campuses, it's something like the Rape Crisis Center that designs the data groups. And like I mean, I think we both support the existence of a rape crisis center. Rape is bad,
Yeah.
but it's, yeah, go out on a limb and say that, but like it's extremely weird that radical feminists whose focus is protecting rape victims are telling the 98% majority, literally, of normal people what to do. And things like, what would it be? Provable, affirmative, enthusiastic consent to every step of sexual or dating contact come out of that reality. And in fact, having that as a norm would make maybe 98% of sex illegitimate. I mean, guys
Yeah.
aren't asking their wives, like, now may I unzip your dress? So that basic phenomenon, imagine what that would actually sound like. I'm now preparing to kiss my way down your breasts. Like, it sounds good for college kids the first time they hook up, but this is not actually the norm in society. We're letting very weird people make the standards. And it's the same with these talk about microaggressions and all this. Nobody is actually mad about being asked where they're from. But you have to you almost have to, as a business executive type, have two sets in your mind. Like there's the actual rules that everyone actually follows, and then there's the weird sort of communist party stuff that's out there in society that you're supposed to do a hat tip to. And you're absolutely right. Like the prevalence of that stuff is going to affect the people that come into the cleaned up working world. All I can really say about that though is that the cleaned up working world itself is a plus, and hopefully we'll get back to the old norm, which is that people come out of college and they're a little radical and they have green hair and they have a bone through their nose or whatever. But then they go work on trading floors and the sales manager doesn't put up with any of that crap. And in 6 months, they're yuppies. So that
Yeah.
used to be the model. We, for a while, for about 10 years, last thing, we let them we let the crazy hippies and feminists and so on reshape the trading floor. I was actually on a bullpen sales floor, but when this happened, I mean, when the idea that you needed an HR department for a bunch of guys barking into phones, and we're going to have a policy on interaction with your floor mates and all this stuff, that actually started coming in like when I was working, and hopefully we can take it out.
Yeah. Okay. So when you say take it out, that was one of the things I was going to ask you about. So could you? Okay. So you're going to be advising corporations. I mean, so could you then suggest to them, like, so to kind of get back to the higher ed thing, like companies go out, recruit students, especially like the big, bigger players. They'll go out on campuses and they'll have recruiting drives and stuff like that. You've had major law firms say, okay, we're not going to hire Columbia grads anymore because of what was happening at Columbia when they were, getting physically and they were getting violent and they were uh, intimidating professors and stuff because conservative people were coming on campus, right? And the same thing happened at Stanford, like in Stanford Law. So a lot of these big law firms said we're not going to have any of these people, intern for us. So if you got corporate America to say, hey, we want merit based, we want people who can do this, but we're not going to look at universities that push social justice as their ethos instead of truth as their ethos. Like, I mean, is is that something that you're planning on doing, or is that something like have you thought about that? Or
Well, it's something definitely we would tell a corporate client. I mean, you need to be aware of who you're bringing into this environment once we've helped you fix this environment. Like, I think a lot of corporations are already aware of this, though, at some level. I mean, I read a study recently that found that quote unquote non-binary people are about a third as likely to get hired. I think was the figure is people who don't identify as non-binary. So if you put your pronouns on a resume and you say my preferred pronouns are Z and Zer, like the boss is just going to take that and round file it. I mean, and there's an obvious reason for that, which is that not only are you kind of a weirdo, which would matter in like a bro sales floor trading floor environment, but you're also a person that's very likely going to be a terrible problem for the company, like constant harassment complaints, constant threats of lawsuits, so on down the line. And I mean, we're definitely going to point out, we're not going to say like hire Republicans or something, but definitely if anyone asks, well, what's the transition plan for this? I mean, now that we've retrained employees, do you have any suggestions? I mean, one of the suggestions would be hire people that are normal, go to Stetson or Texas A&M or I mean, the Ivy League, I guess if you had to pick one, maybe Cornell. But I mean, like you go pick people that are interested in coming in and making sales and building computers as opposed to activism as a corporate vision. And I think like it's like Michael Jordan is still quoted in the old business books for saying, I don't mind Republicans, they buy sneakers too. That's actually a reminder that what you're supposed to be doing as a company is selling the thing that you sell. Like Nike is a shoe company, so they sell shoes. And whenever I see an executive from a company the size of Nike talking on like Fox Business, they seem almost offended by this. Like, well, we consider ourselves to be an entity that helps out the inner city and the poor white regions of Appalachia from which come our players and all this other stuff. And it's like, no, that's 5% of your money you're kind of tithing, but the main thing you do is you sell overpriced shoes to people. And there's nothing wrong with that. So you need to get back to focusing on that. And I think that companies are aware of that at some level. It's just been it's like saying I want a rich husband or sex is part of marriage or something. We've just heard so much of this damned whining from these weird people for 20 years that people feel very awkward about saying normal shit. And you see this across all levels of business as well.
I've seen it. I don't want to call it a trend, but I've seen it a couple of places. I think the most prominent one was forgetting her name. I think it was Jennifer Say or something like that. She was a
Yeah, Jenny
VP.
say.
Yeah, she was a VP at Levi's, and she got fired, and she started her own company now. And she's saying we won't have HR in our company. And I've seen this from a couple other places. Would you be pushing something along those lines? Because I mean, you mentioned it before. Like some of these people are coming in. It's coming in through the HR. It's coming in through the people who like having meetings. Like it's like that's where it's from. So like, would that be something you would push for, saying, hey, maybe completely restructure your HR or just have like a recruiting arm? You don't have the HR side of it. Like how would you go about something like that?
Sorry, could you repeat the first part of that?
No, I was just wondering if you were going to kind of do like what I've seen a couple of places doing, like get rid of their HR department completely, like just speak to
Oh,
companies saying like, "Hey, you don't need this administrative bloat."
yeah, I think to some extent. No, I mean, obviously, if we come in and the contact point is the VP of HR who leans to the
Mhm.
right, he's got a department of five guys, we're not
Mhm.
probably pretty honorable. Our first suggestion is not going to be you need to fire Brad and get
Mhm.
rid of him. That's the problem. I don't think there's anything wrong with having a small HR department. I mean, I see companies like the Daily Wire frequently do promotions for whatever it is, Bambi, to their audience, which is probably very heavily small businessmen. And I mean, that implies to me that there are a lot of people who want to figure out how to fire a problem employee or, how do you legally hire, 12% black guys or 4% Indian Americans or whatever. I mean, there are reasons to have those people there. I think the problem with HR is that the department generally gets way too big and it gets way too left leaning. And yeah, I mean, that would be, again, a point that I think any good consultant would make. What you see very often is a lot of bloat in a department that's sort of HR combined with diversity. And the ultimate example of this is probably the University of Michigan, which at one point had more than 100, I believe 106 diversity and DEI officers. And this became a running joke. Like it's a case study that's been used. But each one of these people made high five, low six figures. They had a whole office full of them. And the problem is that Michigan only has maybe 50,000 students. It's the same size as Illinois, where I went, bit higher ranked, but not dramatically. Their hate crimes each year, maybe six. So you had this whole huge lineup of people that had to kind of, and this is the problem with HR and DEI. Like they had to kind of invent work for themselves. So you started having all of these trainings, these mandatory days of this and that. I'm sure Michigan celebrated every diversity month, including the white ones. Like, hey, it's Norwegian Heritage Month. Everybody get out there. And I think you could just remove all of that without any practical impact on your bottom line. Again, the bottom line, I mean, for a college, your product is students. Sounds a little tacky, but it obviously is. So, like, graduating 70% or whatever they do, that depends on your professors, maybe your coaches. Nothing else has anything to do with it. So, you could get rid of everything that's unrelated to that. The admissions office could be quite literally one guy with a spreadsheet. All you'd really have to do to admit people to college is look at their SAT score, their GPA, and maybe whether they were a varsity athlete. If you wanted to add points for race or class, I think it's illegal now, but you could. You could just add 10 points for race or class. That's all you'd have to do. I could do it in Stata and have as a demonstration at events. Like maybe I'd use Excel, but so that whole thing is pretty much useless. And I think that's pretty common. So yeah, we'd mentioned that to corporations. I mean, Elon Musk is kind of the example there, where when he went into Twitter, he said, I'm going to fire 80% of the employees. And there are all these doomsday predictions like, well, without its beautiful marketing team of young women and without its, ad sales team and without its, bunch of other people that aren't in the coding basement, they had a diversity office. This product's going to die. And in fact, I mean, Twitter is still the number one social media program, at least in terms of engagements. So, I mean, that's the issue.
Yeah. I'm just gonna kind of switch tacks or something. I mean, you're pretty much a quant guy. Like you look at stuff quantitatively. You're looking at numbers and statistics. And I just like one thing that just sticks out recently. Just it was I saw you comment on it. It was majority of terrorists in the United States are it's far right white terrorism, and then you looked at the study and you're kind of breaking it down. It's like, hey, you know, they're including like prison violence is like far right violence and stuff like that. Um, I mean, not specifically on that one, but I see it a lot where people are like, oh, they look at the headline of a study or the oh, it's all far right, blah blah. Oh, there's a study done. Like, how is the average person supposed to navigate stuff like that? Because not everyone has the time to go read every single study, see how it was done, see what the methodology was. At best, you're going to read the summary and you're still going to get it wrong if you don't actually get into it. So, like, how does your average person navigate stuff like this?
Well, I think your average person probably ends up believing a lot of things that are not true. I mean, so like I hate to put it that way, but when Skeptic Research Center looked at how many people normal citizens thought were killed by the police annually, they started with like the leftist or lib column, and they found that the average liberal believed that, well, I'll break it down in category terms. I think it was 30% of them or something like that believed that about 1,000 people annually who were unarmed, maybe it was just unarmed and black, were shot by the police. 14 to 15% believed that 10,000, about 10,000 unarmed young men or young black men were shot by the police. And another 8% believed it was more than that. And if you just break out black guys, like in that year, the total number of unarmed men shot by the cops was like 12. So, I mean, I think there are a lot of situations where content is so pervasive, and this would apply to a lot of things, like what percentage of women are on OnlyFans, um, how many are there more murders than suicides in a typical year? There are a lot of areas where people probably just believe dramatic nonsense. I think that the really all you can do about that if you're a normal citizen is have maybe a heuristic of suspicion. Like I'm looking at this in the mainstream media. I know they lean left. I know they print sensational findings. So I'm going to take this with a grain of salt. And I think that really is how most people look at like climate change predictions, for example. Like the large majority of people are very aware we're not actually all going to die in 12
Yeah.
years. So there's an idea of like, look, I've seen peak oil 1 through 7 as an investor or whatever it's on now. I saw the Y2K doomsday predictions where we just locked the coders in rooms for 2 months. I saw the ozone hole predictions where we just had party girls stop spraying their hair as much. I saw the Western heterosexual AIDS epidemic. People just put on condoms. It's still a 50% gay disease. I saw this prediction, this prediction, this prediction. None of it happened. So people sometimes just look kind of suspiciously or hermeneutically at what's kind of being said out there. I mean, really though, I'd say if you are like a business class person that can read, just go grab the original study and you'll usually see what the problem is. I mean, yeah, the study that found that right-wing terrorists committed more crime than left-wing terrorists, or more acts of terrorism, I guess, than left-wing terrorists or Islamist terrorists who tend to be left-coded in the USA had all kind of problems. Like they left off 9/11. I mean, that was the most striking one. So it's like if you start in 2002, the right-wing far outpaces both Muslims and liberals. It's like, well, what happened in 2001? And if you add 9/11, then all of a sudden it's like the Muslim and lib combined categories are like 3,800 or whatever it was, and the conservative category is like 350. The study also just one or two more breakdown points. They also included all violence by right wing prison gangs as terrorist violence because I mean the Aryan Brotherhood and so on are considered to be potential terrorist groups. And I mean, that was more than half of all the violence. Like every time the AB got in a fight with the Black Gorilla family and a guy got like shanked with a chicken bone, that counted as an act of organized terrorism. And they also like they didn't count riots as terrorism. You can really just go on with this. So like the Watts riot, the LA riots, the Ferguson riots, the BLM riots, none of those counted. And across those 4 riots, I mean, I think you killed 200, 300 people. I mean, I know a usual right-wing estimate for the BLM riots is 35, and that's separate from the Ferguson riots. So, yeah, that's you're going to find stuff like that in almost every paper that you look at. And, when you not only should you have like a hermeneutic approach to a lot of this stuff, even as a right-winger, you should also recognize that these trends generally go in one way. They generally minimize left, maximize right. And they also involve, when you get beyond this one paper, something that I call univariate analysis. So a very consistent weakness when you see a claim that, for example, black people are disadvantaged relative to whites, and the reason's probably racism. One, there probably aren't a lot of variables other than race in what we'd call the statistical model. So, like, did you see that paper where they said black babies were more likely to die than white babies?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, this was a big recent paper. I mean, this is like a PLOS level journal, Springer Journal. I mean, they basically these researchers looked at black and white babies, and they found that black babies, especially with white doctors, were more likely to die than white babies. And so the hypothesis was like, what a horrible thing we're doing as a society to our young black people, our black women of childbearing age, and their sweet children. You know, we're killing them. But like what actually happened was that they didn't adjust, they only adjusted for 2 or 3 things. And one of the things they didn't adjust for was birth weight, which is like the predictor of how healthy a baby's going to be, like whether it's a premature baby or not. And if you adjust for birth weight, you find that the relationship not only goes away, like white doctors means more death, but it reverses. And if you're thinking about how to read data, the obvious reason for that is that a baby that's sickly, that's born prematurely, is going to go to an older, more skilled doctor who's about 85% likely to be white. So not adjusting for that and just saying a baby with a white doctor is more likely to die, like most doctors are white, is just completely meaningless. So that's something you'll see over and over and over again. You'll also see, by the way, that group comparisons tend to be pretty limited. So it's always like blacks and whites. They never throw in Nigerians or Indians or other large groups like this, because if you do, you'll find that the Nigerians or Indians or East Asians beat whites almost all the time. So you'll show like black income, white income. You won't show Asian income, which is off the charts. So they're predictable patterns to look for.
Like also one of these studies, because there was like a paper not like a couple of years back as well, and it was something like 99 point 08% would survive if it was black, and it was like 99.32% would survive if it was white. And they're like, oh, the point 0.8 and the 0.32, oh, it's four times as much for, because
Yeah,
they just did the reverse, right? They said like, X percent would die. Then with the black people, X percent would die. So they're like, oh, it's four times as much. So they're pushing that. And again, the average person reads it. It's like, oh my God, what's going on? Like it's racism. And it's just, they don't tell you, hey, it's four times as much, but this is the percentage we're talking about, right? It's like, it was still under 1%. And it was, they're making it out like it's, uh, terms being overused right now, but they're making it out like it's a genocide or something. It's just, it's ridiculous.
oh yeah, that's right. I mean, like the average person, when you see like four times the risk of death, this is what's called the base rate fallacy, by the way. So, like when someone says that something makes X far more likely. So, for example, the black murder rate is like 5X the white murder rate. We need to work on that in the black community. But like an important fact there is that there are only about 20,000 people in a bad year murdered every year. So if you draw from that, well, if I'm around black people or even minorities, they're going to kill me. You have to understand that you're talking about, 365 days times 340 million people if we're all together, and that's the final rate. So when you look at the baby death, you would think that an estimate of 4x. Oh, but what I was talking about base rates, it's that way for a lot of things. Like I was recently surprised to find you probably shouldn't smoke two cigars every day, a bunch of big cohibas. But I mean, like I was surprised to find that smoking, sure, it increases your chance of lung cancer by 400% or something from baseline, but lung cancer is maybe 1% likely to kill you as an adult male. It's good that we've pulled those stats down because I mean 1 or 2% of the population is quite a lot. But there's actually a rational decision to be made about should I ever smoke or should I ever drink alcohol. It's not like your baseline rate was 16% and that increases 400%. And if you put a black and mild in your mouth, you're going to die. It was you have a very low base rate that increases substantially, and that's pretty common. You just gave an extreme example of it, which is where you're looking at these babies and you would think that a 4x rate of risk of death means that you go from say 8% to 32%. But no, it's like you go from 0.8% to 0.08% to 0.32%. That's what's being described. Like everyone has a 99%, and I can't overemphasize this enough for the young mothers. Everyone, whether you got a black doctor, white doctor, Asian doctor, Jewish doctor, whatever your body weight, whatever, you have a 99% chance of escaping pregnancy healthy with a healthy baby. And in fact, like once you eliminate obesity and teen mothers and all that, it would probably be like 99.9 for all of the sets of moms. So yeah, they're doing this sort of backward margin analysis where it's like 99, 99, but the difference after the decimal point is 3x or 4x for this group. So if you read it that way intentionally, you can create a sensational story. So that's again another thing to look out for.
Something I touched on earlier, and I'm just kind of curious on your take on this. I've had
Sure.
this back and forth a few times. Okay, you're a professor, an associate professor, and I mean, I've been saying like there's no way academia can fix itself, and you need to get some sort of legislation. So you have the choice of working with federal and state governments,
Sure.
or just sitting there and complaining. And frankly, all the vast majority of the people who are screaming, "Oh, academic freedom," I have no sympathy for. As far as I'm concerned, at least in the big Ivies and a lot of the big major schools, there was no academic freedom. It leaned so far one way that you, you know, if a professor spoke out against the current norms, they were in trouble. And like I said, there was already a lack of it, so I have no sympathy for them. But I'm just wondering where you stand on legislation to fix academia or academia doing it on its own.
I favor legislation. I mean, this is the dispute between like heterodox academy, right, and people like Chris Rufo. I mean, I have friends in both camps, but it's pretty obvious that for all the good it does, I have my T-shirt, heterodox academy, all that stuff, fire. Although they're not directly involved with the campus, they haven't really stopped what went on in higher ed. And I don't think they can. Like they fought really well, but they're like 10% of the population in higher ed. So, I mean, every now and then you can get some victory, like the University of Chicago speech standard is adopted by 12 or 15 colleges. But the basic fact of like, I mean, most of the people that go to those meetings are probably on the political left. Like, if you talked about something other than free speech, like feminism, which I have just bantering with people over drinks, I don't think you'd find that there are a whole lot of like Ron DeSantis conservatives in heterodox or in any of those other kind of free the inquiry sort of groups. So they've done a good job, but there really is no victory in sight for them. It would just be they'd be losing 80-20 votes in the faculty senate somewhere. I think that if you come into higher ed, you obviously you don't one thing you don't want is like woke right affirmative action for the right kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like I would hate to see a law that says you have to hire this many conservatives. So universities are scouring like high IQ military officers with no real training in their field. Like I think a lot of elements of sociology and so on are kind of a joke. But still, like you want the guy teaching him to be a sociologist, not some dude barking up there with the Hammer Globe anchor on his arm and all that. I'd get a kick out of that, but I don't think it would be the best thing for these disciplines. Psychology would be particularly funny. But what you do want is rules set externally that prevent, for example, diversity statements. You don't have to explain how your work with ants promotes the advancement of the Black community. I would favor policies saying that you add political belief or even social class to the list of things you can't be fired from. Those are always been two weird exceptions in America. General rule is you can be fired for any reason or no reason at all, but you can't be fired for, say, your race. But you can be fired for insensitive language, things that basically mean class, like uncomfortable appearance, so on. And I might change that at the governmental level. Individual states for their state flagships could initiate 10-year plans. We do want to get the right-wing faculty numbers up to 20% or something that's achievable. We want you to pipeline people coming out of the military into master's and PhD programs. So all that kind of state level stuff, I think you could do. Ron DeSantis actually just took over a small college, a new college, and basically gave it to Chris Rufo, who is, I mean, they're dealing with some financial issues, but the college is doing pretty well. So within the state, you have the ability to actually make change. You can fire the president and appoint someone. And I think that's going to be necessary. Like Trump sparring with Harvard was, funny. Both sides had some good lines in court and so on, but it's also probably needed. Like there's no chance that Harvard by itself without the Supreme Court is going to give up affirmative action. There's no chance Harvard's going to slant to the right. Harvard, in fact, this is specifically Harvard, just hired the South Asian drag queen Lahore Vajistan
Yeah.
as a professor. So I mean, this is what you're dealing with. Like Lahore is going to be teaching classes on like queer culture and drag as a performance. I don't think she's a full professor, but certainly at least adjunct, full year contract. So you gotta be willing to confront the environment where that's going to happen. Like they're not gonna fix that. Like Lahore Vajistan in a fact Senate meeting is not going to say, what we need around here, more Republicans. So someone else is going to have to say that externally.
Okay, and I don't want to bash academia too much, but I mean, or I should say academics per se, but I'm sorry, but a lot of them just are cowards. And I mean, I don't know how else to say it. Like, I've spoken to a couple of people who, and these, I respect what they're doing and how they're trying to push back, but, they were telling me straight out that they were in hiring meetings when they were where they were told straight out, okay, we're not going to hire conservatives, and they said and did nothing. Yeah, you could be putting your livelihood or what online, but you gotta speak up about stuff like that. One person that really kind of ticked me off was Nicholas Christakis. Right after October 7th, so when all these protests started happening initially on the campuses, and he's like, "Oh my God, I couldn't believe this." And he's like, "But I was for 12 years, I saw students go through some really awful DEI trainings that attack. Like I'm butchering what he said, but it was basically to the point of I saw these DEI trainings, they were attacking students' civil rights, and I can't believe that has led to like these protests." The time that he was talking about, he said, "Oh, I saw it for 12 years." He was the master of Stillman College at Yale. I mean, if you're seeing students at your college whose civil rights are being abused by your school, and you're the master of that college where you're kind of responsible for those students, like, academically, and you don't help one of those students file a civil rights complaint, don't tell me you did something. I mean, like, all he did was write a couple of like stern emails or something. And it just, I mean, like, a lot of these people who said, "Oh, well, I've done this and I've done that." I'm like, no, you did nothing. Like you were mentioning, like they were doing these things that were just, you know, shooting into like screaming into the wind because it was not sticking.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think, again, this is why reform from within higher ed probably is not going to work. I've always wondered about the cowardice of academia personally. I think it comes down to just personality types. Like, I mean, I was kind of a broy guy. I had phases of my life, like I've worked on these sort of bullpen floors. I was an athlete. But I mean, I'm also kind of a nerdy dude. Like, I got the glasses on right now.
Yeah.
And in academia, like I would be on like the far right conservative, like I go to the gym every couple days, fringe. So I think a lot of them are just twee little fellows that don't want all this disruption in their life. They don't want a mob of black clad students outside raging at them. That accounts for it. But it is pretty remarkable. Like the whole thing with tenure in academia was that it was supposed to remove any fear of criticizing the authorities, like whether that's the local mayor, the president, the college itself. And in fact, you really don't see that. Like, you don't see a lot of tenured professors that just don't care anymore and like start drinking and become Republicans. They used to be kind of pretty common. But I think now there's been such a pipeline of like the ambitious ass kissing young activist into a lot of fields for a long time. And this is very true in academia that there's not a constitutional ability to do that from a lot of people. A lot of this gets into how competitive academic hiring is right now also. Like colleges are hiring adjunct professors who are just local business people and so on, who are also often pretty well known, but to do a lot of the things their faculty used to do. So they need fewer faculty members. And also because of tenure, college professors don't really retire. I mean, if you're a Harvard professor, you're going to be a Harvard professor basically until you die. You're going to be 75 or 80. You're going to be creaking through classes on biology, teaching kind of older stuff. So it's very difficult to get a foot through the door as a young person. And the diversity stuff really adds to that. Because what you see with the diversity piece is that older white people, like the boomer generation, none of them gave up their jobs to like edgy black bisexual contenders. What the jobs that had to be sacrificed belong to the younger generation of white people. So if you're going to hire in a way that would get you to proportionality for blacks or something like that in academia, that means each year, not only are you hiring very few people, but only like 35 to 40% of those people are going to be white. So if you actually get in as a young white woman or something to higher education, there's probably a big sense of I finally made it. I no longer have to I can shut this OnlyFans down for a lot of the young academics, actually. And I don't necessarily know if that's sex specific, but that's a little crude. So, like, I can stop working at Starbucks. I'm finally here. And that doesn't really go along with a desire to brutally challenge the system.
Okay. Look, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but getting back to your book, so sorry, not your book, uh your new organization. So when when is it going to be like up and running fully? Like, do you have a timeline of like how you're trying to proceed or where you're going to be going with that? Or
Yeah, about a week or two. I mean, we've just sent in a bunch of SEC paperwork and all that, and what we're trying to do is what's called a Reg CF, which is a massive online fundraiser. So we actually, because of how wired in myself and Brooks and Kevin are, much less our consulting team, like Colin Wright is also on it. I mean, people that are have these massive online presences. We want to just say, like, this is a chance for you to invest and support your convictions. Like, if you throw in $100 in 2 years, we'll give you 110 bucks back.
Mhm.
But you also get to back like a large scale attack on DEI. So we're going to start the online promotion of that in addition to picking up whale investors in, I mean, the next couple of weeks. Really, the website, like I said, it's Unified Solutions America. You guys know how to spell. UnifiedSolutionsAmerica.com is live. So we're pretty much ready to go. We just booked some of our last advisors. I mean, we got Mel Chin, Beth Feely, Kim Herman, Jason Riley from the Wall Street Journal. So we got a lot of people ready to go.
Okay, cool. Well, look, I'll put that link in there and also put in links where people can get your books. Um, thank you very much for coming back on. It was good talking to you again.
Always
And
good talking to you, man.
yeah, thanks. And thank you everyone for listening.